The budget is a critical policy tool that outlines the government's priorities and shapes national development. It is more than numbers on paper. It is a blueprint for development, a reflection of government priorities, and a commitment to citizens. However, legislative oversight is essential to ensure that public funds are allocated and utilized effectively, holding the executive accountable for fiscal decisions. Today, in partnership with Enough is Enough, as we always do every Monday, we'll delve into the budget, legislative oversight, and active citizenship. All right, thanks for staying tuned. Now, despite its importance, weak enforcement of legislative decisions, oversight gaps, and limited public awareness continues to hinder effective governance. Active citizenship plays a crucial role in bridging these gaps, and informed and engaged public can demand accountability, monitor budget implementation, and influence policy decision. To join me to have this conversation, right, is Oke Epia. He is the CEO of Other Paper, and he's joining me via Zoom. Thank you so much for joining me. Epia. I hope I pronounced your name properly.
Epia, last name is right. The first
Epia.
one, not so right, you know, okay. But it's okay. You know, okay, Epia.
Is it okay or okay? Okay, okay.
Yeah, okay, the first one.
Okay, are you from the Delta part of Nigeria? Okay.
You are correct.
Oh, okay. I thought it was okay, so I was thinking you were Igbo.
You're not alone. Most people think it's from the other side.
Okay.
You know.
Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much.
Osai
Uwame, yes. You can call me Uwa so you don't bite your tongue. All right, so...
Thank you, Uwa. Pleasure to be here.
All right, so the budget, legislative oversight, and active citizenship, that's what we're talking about today, right? So if we want to look at the 2025 national budget, I think it's about 54 trillion, approximately $36 billion, you know, was approved by the National Assembly on the 13th of February. You know, in that budget, every time I look at the budget and I see debt servicing and I see fiscal deficits, you know, I don't know what those terminologies mean, so that's why you're the expert to help us. But debt servicing would run on, I think, about 14.3 trillion naira, I believe. Then the fiscal deficit would be about 13 trillion, right? So deficit to GDP ratio would be 1.5. So given these figures, you know, concerns arise regarding the feasibility of the budget in supporting the GDP growth and, of course, also achieving economic stability, which is one of the biggest challenges that we have really suffered, you know, our economy. Even though some say that the economy is actually getting better, Naira is getting a lot more, you know, balanced against the dollar, you know, but some people are still coming again and saying that one is false hope. Don't bank on that. But you are the expert, right? Help us break it down. What's your overview on our budget for the our 2025 budget? First of all, let's start from there.
First, for a disclaimer, I am not an economist, neither am I a fiscal policy expert in the strict sense of the word. A public policy expert, that's in a more generic sense. You know, I have some good experience and footprints on fiscal, you know, policies. You know, because part of the work that we do entails that we also advocate for transparency and accountability in public finance management. You know, so those are, you know, general, you know, work that we do. So if you want to get a detailed economic analysis, fiscal analysis.
So we can stick to the fiscal policies then.
Yeah, you know, I needed to make this point because I understand that when we hear budget, generally as citizens, we tend to be we put away, maybe not put away, but we don't show sufficient interest because we believe, oh, these are figures, and figures, huge figures. So they kind of, throw us back, and that's the beginning of disinterest. And that's also, unfortunately, the entry points, or the point at which the establishments, those in leadership, those in the position to allocate the values that define and direct the affairs of the country, also double down on the things that they do. That's where I'm coming from. So that disinterest, that apathy, if you like, or that insufficient understanding of public policy is the bane of, development in this country. If you ask me, that would be my first submission on this matter. Because between December 18 and today, this is almost like 3 months, thereabouts, that the budget, 2025 budget conversation has been ongoing. But really out there on the streets, out there in homes, and, public places, how much do we know about the integrity of the budget? We leave it, okay, the experts will tell us, the experts, but we don't all need to be experts. We just need to have that understanding of why, allocations have been made. Those allocations are made in what and in whose interest, to serve what purposes. It is David Easton. For students of political science, they would know that name, who says that politics, is the authoritative allocation of values. So for a country, for a state, the allocation of value that determines the direction, of state policy, that determines, development objectives and priorities. It begins with the budget. That is why it is, really concerning that when it comes to budget, we do not have that, sufficient interest and understanding by citizens. So when you hear fiscal deficit, you hear debt to GDP ratio, you hear debt servicing. These things can mean, we can't really understand them, in the strict sense of the word. But when you know that, the price of commodities, are way above the roof, when you know that we owe trillions of naira, to foreign and local debt creditors, when you know that the cost of living, it is the way it is because of the amounts of monies that we have borrowed, for which we are not sure we are seeing the value for which those monies have been put or have been used, then we should be incentivized to pay more attention to what these figures mean. What do they actually portend when they say they are spending, 54 trillion naira in 2025, as has been approved by the National Assembly of Nigeria? And I'm going to come to that, because on the topic that you have the budget, you have legislative oversight, and you have active citizenship. These are 3 broad, areas, sub-themes of the topic that you have. Now we are talking about the budget. The budget as it is, it's the figure. It has been approved by the National Assembly. It needs to go to the president, who needs to put his assent to the document for it to become a law. So the budget, as it's been approved, is a bill, that has been passed by the National Assembly. And this is where, that looping of citizenship, active citizenship, comes in. Through the process of the budget's consideration and approval by the National Assembly, how much did we know, or how much interest did we as citizens, did we as stakeholders in the Nigerian project put in the budget? The budget in the National Assembly has gone through at least 6 stages. First reading, second reading, public hearing, that's defense by MDAs, ministry departments and agencies. It has been processed by the committees on finance, on appropriation rather, and it has been laid back on the floor of plenary, and it has been approved. So these stages are, of course, the rudimentary stages of for which a bill becomes law, and the budget is a bill. So all through this process, how much engagement did we have as citizens with the legislature?
How are we supposed to engage?
Did we have?
How are we supposed to engage as citizens, you understand, so that, we can understand what, where our flaws are as citizens?
Interesting question. So becoming aware that that process is on is the first thing. So we need to pay attention that that process has begun in the National Assembly. And engaging is using that knowledge of your awareness to engage with your representative, to engage with the committees of the National Assembly. Now, let me break this down a bit. Every Nigerian has a representative in the National Assembly. You have a senator representing you. You have a member of the House of, representing your federal constituency. So there are at least two entry points for you to, engage with the legislature. And then within the legislative institution itself, it has, structures and mechanisms with which it engages with the public. So after the debates of the second reading of the budget bill, it is referred to the Committee on Appropriation, which is the committee that has overall ultimate jurisdiction on the budget proposal sent in by the president. So that committee distributes the budget to all the standing committees of the Senate or the House of Representatives, as the case may be. Standing committees are those committees that have direct supervisory jurisdiction.
Roles, yeah.
Supervisory roles and jurisdiction over ministries, departments, agencies, different sectors of government and public life, whether it is sports, whether it is youth, all of that. They have committees that have jurisdiction over every single agency of government, single ministry and department of government. So the allocations for each of these MDAs are put through those committees that have to interrogate the figures and interrogate the MDAs, these allocations that have been made for you. What are your plans for it? The ones that you got for the last year, 2023, 2024, 2022, as the case may be, what did you do with it? So that's where the budget implementation comes in. They call it budget performance in fiscal parlance. The budget performance last year. How did you do? How well did you do? Now you have, this allocation. What do you want to make of it? Okay. Your defense of that allocation allows the committee, as it were, to say we are convinced or we are not. So that's where the powers of the National Assembly to make laws come in. They have that power, as it were, to alter, to reallocate those resources that have been allocated as a bill by the president or by the presidency or by the executive arm of government. So they reallocate as they deem fit because they represent you and I in the National Assembly because they act on our behalf. Now, this last point I just made is very critical because they do that on our behalf, at our behest. But do we know what they are doing?
That's the point.
So how many of us as citizens, whether as individual citizens or as groups or as organizations or even as media, engage with these committees, engage with individual lawmakers? Now, they do what they call public hearings, right? For a normal process, one of the 6 stages for a bill to become law, they have to have a public hearing. And so those budget defense processes could very well be public hearings, and because they are for MDAs, it may not really have been open to, participation by citizens, but being aware of that process also allows us as citizens to be able to interrogate what is going on within that process by the National Assembly and MDAs. We are allocating 44 billion, for instance, to Ministry A. Why? On whose behalf? What are they doing with that money? They are going to build roads from the east to the southwest, for instance. Who determines the priorities? The president has, of course, determined the priorities. The National Assembly will make its input. But as citizens, we need to be aware and engage with our legislators. And that is why they are there. We can call them up on the phone. We can write letters to them. We can visit constituency offices. We can go to their offices in Abuja and make demands and say, what exactly are you doing? This way, these priorities that you think they are not really our priorities. And let me take this down. Let me drive this down home to make it make sense for the average citizen. Now, for each budget, there is these allocations that they call zonal intervention projects, otherwise, or popularly called constituency projects, right? So each member of the National Assembly, Senator and House of Reps has specific allocations that they, on behalf of citizens, make projects or nominate projects into the budgets. for the implementation. So during implementation, that's like the direct benefits that they bring back home to their constituencies, either at the Senate level, senatorial districts, or the federal constituencies. Now, in making those critical decisions as to what projects to put in the budget, to use those constituency allocations for, if I may use that word, where citizens consulted, where constituents are aware that they have, each member of the National Assembly, for instance, has 100 million naira, or each principal officer of the National Assembly, for instance, has, multiple of that amount of money. What consultations did happen? If there were consultations, to what extent?
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, they do a lot of boreholes. That consistency project, we know we can name the projects for you, But I just wanted to quickly pause you to ask a question, because sometimes all of these processes that you're talking about, right? Shouldn't there be a time frame as to when the president, presents the budget to the House? Then of course it goes through all that 6 processes, and then eventually it now becomes a law. Is there no time frame? And because most have argued that budget passage, right? Usually that process, the submission of the budget is usually very, is delayed like 9 minutes or so. You now find that the people that are supposed to have this oversight function on the budget, it is rushed. The process is rushed. So all this time you say, okay, go and consult with your constituency. They ain't got no time. They know their constituency need borehole. They know they need they need transformer. So how does that affect this entire process that you have broken down?
So that is why there are boreholes all over the place that ain't working. Boreholes that are dilapidated and that are in disuse, because they have not been consultations. The people may just require a market, to be able to increase their commercial activity. They may just require that the drainage along the communities be fixed. And so for them, that may mean more than the boreholes. So this lack of consultations or adequate consultations, because to be fair and honest, some of them do actually consult, whether they are consulting members of their political parties or they are consulting their cronies. Consultation is consultation. So it's, again, the extent of consultation, how inclusive the consultations are is what, we are talking about here. So if these consultations must happen, they must really be broad-based and inclusive, right? So if that is not the case, that is where the issues are. And that is why there is this misallocation of resources, if I may put it that way, with respect to the zonal intervention projects, otherwise called constituency projects. But the question you're asking is, what time do they have? Because they are pressed for time. Legally speaking, or by law, there is no time frame for the budget to be passed, right? So there have been delays, right? We've seen this a lot in the last dispensation, especially. Dispensation, especially before the second term of President Buhari, who managed to stabilize what they call the January to December fiscal cycle, budget cycle. Before then we had long delays. There was even a time we had the budget passed in May, of the year, and before the president signed it, it was June. So we have seen all of this, and that's because the law, the Constitution, provides that pending when the budget is passed, the president, the executive, the government can continue to expend resources to a certain percentage of the previous approval, the previous year's budget approval. So that is the leeway. I'm trying to get the specific section of the Constitution that stipulates that. So that is as we know, what you may call timeline, because after that period, you may not continue to spend. So if there was a timeline where, okay, if the January to December budget cycle was a legal requirement, for instance, we would not have a situation where, the budget is presented on December 18th and leaving just a couple of days, for the legislature to consider such huge, amounts of, requests and pass the budget. But again, that's where the legislature, as it were, also needs to realize that it should change in itself, and it is by extension should change in the Nigerian people.
But do we have an effective legislative arm in Nigeria? Or we just have a yes ma, yes sir committee. The yeas have it, the nays have it. Is that, I mean, do we have an effective legislative? Have we even had a very effective legislative, what's it called, arm of government in Nigeria?
It's debatable. You know, it's quite dramatic and convenient when you see the ayes have it, the nays have it. You know, we have had a legislature that has, to be honest, not lived up to its billing in terms of oversight of the executive. The legislature has done, you know, fairly well in making laws. Like I say all the time, Nigeria's problem is not for lack of laws. It is the implementation of the laws that's where we always fall short, you know. But that's critical function of maintaining oversight over the executive and judicial arm of government, the judiciary and the executive, is where the legislature continues to drop the ball. So if there was a law, even if there is no law, it is not, you know, tidy. It is not a decent time frame for the National Assembly, the legislature of any state, to rush through the budget, because the budget, like I have explained in my opening remark, it is the most critical document for determining the direction of development of a country or a subnational unit, as the case may be. So that authoritative allocation of value is not something that should be rushed through. It's not something that should not receive thorough scrutiny and thorough debate, exhaustive debate, you know, by not just the National Assembly, but by stakeholders through those public hearings.
Okay, for what you're saying, I've not seen it happen. Let's not even go there, because all these excesses, who has that time? Have you seen the way our lawmakers, you know, act? I don't think they even have that time. But you know what? Let's go on a very short break, right? When we come back from that break, we'll continue the conversation. I think we have a few questions on YouTube for you as well. Stay with us. We'll be right back. All right, thanks for staying with us. We still have with us, okay. Oh, God. Okay. No. Yeah, okay. Yeah. This is my tongue twisting things. All right, so please remember you can join the conversation. Send us an SMS or WhatsApp to 081-803-84663. Please call us also on 070-2500-7749 or 070-142-42420. All right, so Mr. Ekpia, can you kindly clarify if there are legislative standing committees running oversight on government MDAs? Why do we still have people exercising oversight doing the same project? The same person, his name is Alade Okomo Babatunde. He says, secondly, recently I began to see projects approved in the budget for a particular constituency being implemented in different constituencies entirely. How constitutional is that? Because I was just going to ask around this same question, you know, when you talked about the people that, you know, that them monitors, you know, in all of this, when the several committees, you know, they've scrutinized and they've done all their own work, there's supposed to be the Public Accounts Committee, right, that they review, they track, and they ensure that utilization of these funds, you know, and they do investigation, they conduct some of this oversight function to ensure that there's accountability in the spending. So what this person is saying, this is the constituency that was approved. He's seeing that project being done in a different constituency. How constitutional is that? And he asked the first question about clarify if there are legislative standing committees running oversight on government MDAs, and why do we still have people exercising oversight doing the same projects?
No, so to be honest, and just to put this, you know, upfront for everyone, there's really a lot to unpack in discussing, you know, the topic this evening, you know, and so we may not have all the time, and you know, but the great thing is that we hope that we are communicating some understanding to our viewers. You know, there is no doubt that we have an ineffective, and I mean no words in saying this, we have an ineffective legislative oversight system as far as the National and State Assemblies in Nigeria is concerned. You know, there are committees, you know, in fact, legislative governance of the country is even becoming really something of concern because of the number of committees that we are having these days. In the House of Representatives, for instance, we have over, I think we have about up to 120 or over 120 committees doing what? You know, and if you have those numbers of committees, what are they really, you know, what is the impact that they are making, you know, over the MDAs or agencies that they, you know, they provide oversight on, you know. So there is no doubt that the legislative oversight that we currently have is ineffective, it is inefficient, and requires lots and lots of, you know, reforms. Now, I also need to say this. It is not all about the fault. It is not all of this is not really the fault of the legislature or of legislators. It is also an institutional thing. It is also what you may call the political dynamics of the administration. So if you have, and this is kind of trying to answer the second question about if you have separation of powers, you know, there should be actually in a democracy like we have in Nigeria, 3 arms of government, 3 branches of government, the executive, the presidency, the executive, which is of course the presidency, the legislature, and the judiciary. And there is supposed to be separation of powers. More importantly, there's supposed to be what you call checks and balances, and that's where legislative oversight comes into play, where it checks what is presumed to be the excesses or the inadequacies of the other 2 arms of government. So the ineffectiveness and inefficiencies in legislative oversight is, again, I repeat, the bane or the biggest bane, I may say, of our development dilemma in Nigeria currently. And this is not to say that all hope is lost. You know, because I look back at the quote that you shared earlier, you just need a small group of committed and thoughtful people. You know, so I'm happy to be on this conversation because we are talking to and listening to a small group of people in the minimum. And the convictions that we're able to stimulate in this small group, you know, can reverberate to other small groups. And before you know it, can make a grand swell of
Absolutely.
reform, and that's how change happens.
Okay.
Right? So we need to have people, citizens, do not stand by the sidelines, do not stay back, do not become spectators, do not give up, do not be intimidated by the jargons and technicalities, you know, of politics, of budgets, of legislative processes. We do this, and there are groups like us who do this, who go the extra length and time to make sure that we try to break this down for people to see. Pick up this knowledge and engage what you have learned with your legislators. So the question you asked earlier was about, so if you know that they are not doing these things, and because nobody has the time, they don't have the time, we can demand. And that is where active citizenship comes in.
Because I was just going to ask you that because
this topic.
You know, like active citizen engagement, of course, is definitely crucial in all of these things because that is what we are seeing now, right? Because if you really must track that there is a tangible development that goes with every time that a budget is allocated to something, it translates into something that is tangible. It means that we as citizens, we need to be intentional. So what are the quick steps that you would start to intentionally do as a citizen that would show that, yes, you are ready? You know, so what would you say? Because when you talked about public hearing earlier on, when you were talking, I know that a lot of people, like I know some people that follow all the, because in the National Assembly, we see some of the sittings. It's televised. And I know a lot of people that follow it, right? But it's not so much of just watching it and saying, okay, you're watching what is going on. How are you contributing? So what would be the steps that would show that the citizen is now ready to actively engage?
It's not rocket science. I said earlier, pick up the information, the knowledge, the learning that you need to have. And at other people will do that. As far as the legislature in this country is concerned, we are about the only one that does that. We have done this for about 10 years. We continue to do that. You know, pick up the learning that you can have. Use that learning to activate conversations. And it's, how do you do this? Do I have access? I can't go to Abuja. I can't afford to go to Abuja for public hearings. So I am shut out. Yes. But you are not shut out at your constituency level. Because, there's supposed to be constituency offices where the senator, the distinguished senator, or the honorable member comes to. If there are no constituency offices, he at least comes to the constituencies. If he doesn't come to the constituency, he lives in a city, in an urban area where he feels more comfortable and doesn't need to go to the constituency, which is totally wrong anyways. But we can find him. It's not like it's the other top government functionaries like the president that can access to. But leave the issue of access. We can organize, like we're having this conversation. Can we put an outcome document from this conversation and send it to members of the National Assembly that represent you and I and say, look, this is what we want you to do. This is what we have learned. This is what we want you to do. And we have written a letter to you. And thank God for the age of social media these days. So it's not like, okay, you have to publish it, in the traditional media. You don't have that resource. But with social media, you can amplify your voice. You can publish that letter, and that brings pressure to bear on the distinguished senator and the honorable member, and he is forced to come to the table to engage with you. That is one aim. Because these are practical ways that we either are not aware of or we overlook, or we think that these guys are really so far away, they are so far-fetched. The Constitution, the rules, standing orders of the Senate and House of Reps provide some of these things already. So like the public petition system, where citizens are entitled to express their grievance, articulate it, and send it as petitions to the National Assembly that has the responsibility to see them and process them and ensure that a resolution is made to resolve the matter, right? How many people are aware that there is a public petition system in place? How do they engage with that system if they are not aware?
So I was just going to say to you, because I'm a content person now, right? Hearing you speak, right? I'm just thinking, have we done some TikTok videos and that are easily consumed by the crop of people that we have right now? Because again, like you rightly said, social media is such a fantastic advocacy tool that we could actually use. But you see, when the information is going over the heads of people, they might not get it, right? How easily assimilatable these informations would guarantee whether the information would travel far and it would drive home the point. I loved what you did in the beginning. You might not understand all the jargons, but you would understand that the fact that you have a bad road, it means that somebody neglected a constituency project. So how can we intentionally, use the media to then drive it in those easily what's it called? Like, I don't know whether we would use visuals, audios, whatever, TikTok style and all of that. How do we intentionally start to drive this point? Because we are, I was speaking to someone earlier this morning. I said, Nigerians are not ready for serious content. I always watch, like, for instance, some podcasts in the US, Diary of a CEO. They talk, it is very heavy, it is very, cerebral, the kind of conversations. When you do those kind of podcasts in Nigeria and it's lasting for 3 hours, nobody's going to watch it. Meanwhile, you see millions of views. We are so interested in, want to dance, we want to do all of these things. It's intentional. Because that's why a lot of us are not even interested in some of the things that are going on, because we think it's not even part of, let's just be doing our thing. So how do we intentionally not just shut this, because there are a huge number of people, we don't shut them out. We're able to bring that advocacy to the language that they understand, driving it through social media.
This is why, but first of all, you have raised questions and you have provided the answers. You have saved me that, that time, because it is that intentionality, on the side of citizens, that is the issue. The deprioritization of what is important and prioritization of what is less important, of trivialities, if you like. Forgive me, if I'm using I don't want to offend the sensitivities of people who are in, entertainment. These are great stuff, great endeavors, of different value, but the public policy space is such that, it determines what happens to every other sector. The laws that are made in the legislature, by the legislature, and assented to by the president, and also pronounced upon by the judiciary when there is when there are conflicts. These are the things that affect the prices of goods and commodities. These are the things that affect whether those roads are fixed or not. These are the things that affect the price of data. They have just recently increased the price of data, right? So it is a policy decision. If citizens say, look, all members of the National Assembly must stand up against, because we don't want this, for instance. I'm just using this as an example. This is not, it's not valid because it's a commercial, it's an economic decision. It's a business matter. I don't want to delve into that, I'm just using that as an example. It's to place that demand on their representatives in parliament to say, we do not want this. If you go ahead and approve this, we would use our power of the thumb. When next you come for re-election, we would ensure that you don't get re-elected and we'll kick you out.
Have they always depended on our thumb, in fairness?
I know this question was coming, but it is not for us to, become apathetic because of that, You must agree with me that we are also making progress gradually. We have in our electoral process, and that's an entirely different conversation. We have seen, the modernization of vote buying, of election rigging. We don't have that crude methodology of running away with ballot boxes anymore. They have other ways of doing it, even using the cloud, servers and non-servers, beavers and non-beavers to do these things, right? So you see that they are also getting smarter. So that sophistication that the political establishment has, citizens need to deploy their own smartness, their own energy, their own innovation, because we are very innovative people, to ensure that we match them and even go above them or go beyond them several steps. That is where the prioritization of what is important and deprioritization of what is less important comes in. So you make content, and because you are not shaking bomb, nobody watches it. It's just there looking at you and you are looking at it. But if you are making content that people know that this content, it may not be that type that appeals to my inanities, if you like, forgive me. But it is the type that determines the fundamental direction of life in society, then I should pay more attention to it. So there is something about as citizens. So we need to interrogate our citizens, the agency of our citizenship. What for us is a priority? What do we want to do? But I also think
that that orientation, right, is also a weapon that is being used right now in Nigeria, because if you notice, that is what drives, a lot of young people, right? They're not interested. So it's intentional, because a government that is really ready to solve this problem, it would show in different things. You might even start to put, these kinds of conversations at the level of even nursery school, so that they can start to intentionally want to be interested in those things. But final thoughts for you. I want to ask you, how effective are town halls, right? Because again, some people have also said that citizens can also demand regular town hall meetings where they can also explain, lawmakers can explain how the budget is being spent and why the decision to prioritize what and not prioritize the other. How effective are town hall? Then we'll wrap up the conversation.
Town halls are very effective in as much as they are inclusive and they do not exclude people, exclude, sectors, exclude the, vulnerable and marginalized. Town halls are effective and they don't have to be physical. We live in a world that is now moved beyond just, face-to-face. This could very well be a town hall conversation, this meeting that we're having, this, show, this your show, lovely show, beautiful content you're making. You could design it to become a town hall. And because you have audience, you have followers, it makes it imperative for the lawmaker invited not to decline, because he has to come and make his point. He has to come and defend, he has to come and speak to citizens, right? So it is being innovative, it's being clear-headed, it's being, again, intentional. So the use of town hall made like, okay, yeah, we just gather political supporters, parties members, and they will all be there and sing his praises, and then he will give tokens tokenist items, and everybody's happy with, small items, and they go. Town hall has happened, right? But that does not bring the kind of impact that we want. And that's where it matters. Again, I go back to your quote. This small group of people who realize that we're not getting it right in the social media space, that we're getting it wrong in the priorities that we project and promote using our own influence and platform. We aggregate all of that together and begin to change the narrative one step at a time.
Absolutely.
And we will make it the course, and do not be intimidated by the antics of the political establishment, because they don't give up. They never will.
Thank you so much. I mean, you're the first guest that I will have that will repeat my quote 3 times for me. But when I saw that quote, I thought it was quite apt for the conversation for today. Mr. Oke, Abi? Epia.
You tried this time.
It's still in my head. So I have a friend that is from your side, so I always mix up her name. But thank you so much. You've been an amazing guest. We hope to have you again. At least, I mean, from just this talk, I've already seen 3, 4 different kinds of topics that we could also continue to address. And like you rightly said, we need to be intentional about the kind of content that we want to put out. We have to be focused on our country, because the truth is the change cannot happen except when we are ready for it to happen. And we must be intentional with our, every single conversation matter. Thank you so much for making out time to be with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.